Yeah. Well, I'm glad I mentioned it.
I'm pausing now. I'm going to close my door.
Well, good morning for those of you that are in here. Hi, Natalia.
Hello there.
Hi,
how are you?
How are you? It's so good to see your face. I'm trying to, sometimes it's hard to remember people's names, their faces.
Hello.
Hi.
This is my brother.
Oh, hello. What's your name?
He will also join us for the first time.
I'm Robert. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you're her brother, but what's your name? Do I
I'm
call you
Robert.
brother? What?
Robert.
Robert. Ah, nice to meet you, Robert.
Nice to meet you.
Have you been to Atlantykron before?
No.
No.
He was not brave enough, and finally he can join our meetings.
Yes, you don't have to deal with the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
No mosquitoes. Those are those are the hardest part of the island. So it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Were you here yesterday?
No, I couldn't join, unfortunately, but I'm here today.
Okay. Yes, you are. I was just curious. If like who we didn't do it this way where we could see anyone. It was just Heather and I, and then even with me, Alex. It was Alex before. I couldn't see Alex, so I felt like I was just teaching to Heather, even though I knew people were out there. So.
Hi, Heather.
Well, good morning to the rest of the room, and then anyone else out there on Facebook. I can't see the Facebook world. I could try to, but then that would divide my attention, and it would be very hard for me to talk, because it's hard for me to do anything other than talk. Anyway, welcome to Maximize Your Memory. I'm coming to you from Rochester, New York, United States. It's in upstate New York. So we are in an area that actually, other than the castles and the beautiful mountains, has a similar look to the landscape of Romania. So, but it is, I actually think the landscape of Romania is much more beautiful, but in Rochester, it's kind of the same latitude on the planet. It's very close, so our landscape's very similar. So welcome to the class. This is day 2 from yesterday, and my name is France. And so just a little something about myself if you weren't able to view the video from yesterday or to attend, is that my passion is to teach adults, and part of that passion, which I didn't mention yesterday, is I love teaching about brain fitness, about the brain and social skills, and I like to take what we get from research and science and apply it to our daily lives to make it a much better life and to improve our longevity. So that's kind of my jam. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. But also I love to teach adults. So I mentioned that a few times yesterday. So moving into today's, or we're moving on from what we talked about yesterday. And I do want to say Bună ziua, because it's afternoon, I think, in Romania. And it's Bună dimineața this morning for me, very early. And then for Heather, I think it's still nighttime, right? Heather, what time is it where you are?
It is still dark outside. It's about 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome.
It's 8 a.m. here in New York, so. So welcome to, again, the rest of the room, and we will just kind of do a brief review of yesterday. I'm not going to get too in-depth with it. So I wanted to mention that I created this course. It's a course that I had already delivered to another group of people about 3 months ago, and it is online. I can send you the link. I was just talking with Heather about how I created a Facebook page and through my, or Facebook group through my business page, which is called Learning and Motivation Specialist, but it's not letting me invite anyone even other people that have liked my Facebook page. So if you want the link to this course, I can send it to you through Facebook Messenger. So if you private message me on my regular Facebook page for my personal page, which is McCloskey, and I just look a tiny bit different because I had my hair blonde actually just last month. So this is me, and if you aren't friends with me yet, you can friend me and I can send you the link if you private message me too, or you can just private message me and not friend me, that's fine. And then if we're already friends, just message me. So this is a course that has the materials, the information, and even though this is a memory class, I don't expect you to remember all the information I distribute in here. It's actually a workshop type of course, so it's expected to have you be practicing and working on these skills that you're learning. And the key is that they're skills that you're learning, so it takes time. It will take a while to actually learn the skill that I'm teaching you, or the strategy. Heather, yesterday there was a question that Gabby had, and it was, and I've been trying to remember it throughout yesterday, and I haven't.
Handwriting. It
Yes.
was the importance of handwriting linked to memory, and if that enables you to remember faster.
So we were talking about the body, the mind-body connection, and how your body does have a memory component to it, and then it will remember things that it was first our brain, then it was first our body, then our brain. And the fact that we do remember things and all of that is obviously an advantage evolutionary wise. So as organisms have evolved, their brain has developed, and therefore they remember more to improve their survival. But before the actual nervous system became developed, your body had, or when the nervous system was developing, your body started to have a system to be able to remember information for survival. So to answer Gabby's question is, yes, research is showing that there is a benefit to movement as you're trying to learn. And so that can be across any topic, any event, and handwriting is way more effective than typing, because typing is a repetitive movement that if you're typing about a science class versus a sociology class versus a language class, when you're typing, it's the same strokes, same keystrokes, same finger movements. But when you're writing, you actually shift and change, and there's more movement into it. And not to say that there isn't any benefit to typing, but it's more systematic, it's more rote. With writing, you're a little bit more engaged, you're a little bit more into it. And so that's something that I know that when I actually do learn the information better from a personal standpoint. I do use my own narratives or my own story in my teaching. So I talk about experiences that I've had, I'll talk about anecdotes, and then I'll talk about the research. I do remember reading something that handwriting is much more beneficial to note-taking in college settings than than typing in or texting in your information. So just by it going in your eyes, through your body, out through your hands, and you're writing it, has an effect. If you struggle, so a lot of people who are aging or getting older, one effect that is proven in the research, a lot of people will talk about why is their memory getting worse, and that's not proven in the research, but what is proven in the research is that the brain processes a little bit slower, it's a little bit different, and that people may have word finding challenges. So a strategy that can be used is to use your hand to try to recall a word by, maybe if you want to say the word stop. This is what they use for people who have aphasia, who have speech challenges after having a stroke. So they'll use their hand or their finger to try to draw the word. So when you bring in your body in trying to recall a word, it may be more effective. And if there's something you want to remember, you can try to use your body to help you remember. Like, and so it's so funny when I have to come up with examples, I struggle. I go, oh, what's a good example of trying to remember something? So if you want to, let's say you want to remember someone's name. I actually have a strategy for that that doesn't have anything to do with these strategies that I'm teaching in Maximize Your Memory, but it almost doesn't matter what I teach you as long as I'm giving you memory strategies. But let's say I want to remember somebody's name and I'm really struggling with it. So I'm going to pick on Natalia. I'll use Natalia's name. So maybe I have a particular hand gesture that I use every time I think of Natalia. So I go, Natalia, Natalia. And so there's actual effect there. I will tell you my name remembering strategy. I might as well go there for a second, go off topic. Might be any different than I usually am. So to remember people's names. So when people will say to me all the time, I have such a hard time remembering people's names. And let me tell you, everyone does. That's not a unique feature. It's not meaning somebody's memory is failing or your memory is failing. It's a common thing. It's actually very unique for people to forget people's names. To remember people's names. It's very, very, very unique for people to remember people's names. So the one main reason is your brain is not wired to remember names. It is more wired to remember faces, but it's wired to remember if you are a threat, if you are somebody that I need to fear, or if you're a friend. And if you're a friend, I'm less likely to specifically remember your face. I might actually remember the person that I'm afraid of more clearly. So a strategy that I have kind of created from things that I've learned in my undergrad studies is that you say the person's name out loud when you meet them. So you say, hello, I'm France, what's your name? And they will say, hi. Heather, you want to demonstrate with me?
Hi.
Hi, I'll say, hello, my name is France.
Hi, I'm Heather.
Hi, Heather. So I've said her name once. If I can't pronounce it very clear, like Heather, I make sure I say it clearly, and she confirms, she gives me feedback and says, yes,
Heather.
And then I say, okay, Heather. Then 2 minutes later, it's got to be a brief period of time. 2 minutes later, I try to recall it again. And more times than not, I won't remember the person's name. And I will immediately interrupt them or interrupt myself. And I will say, excuse me, what was your name again? And then they'll say, so excuse
Heather.
me, what? Heather. Oh, yes, Heather. And then I might go, Heather, 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 like that. Then about 45 minutes to an hour later, I try to recall the person's name again. Now, I may not be talking with them. I may be driving home. I might be at home. But I try to recall their name. And if I have if it's likely that I will see them again, if I can't remember their name, I can make a note and say, oh, I got to figure that out next time I see them. Or I usually remember it. And then from there, I will continuously remember their name if they are continuously in my life. So if if I'm not going to see them ever again, I guess I may or may not remember their name. And I met before the whole COVID thing and the shutdown. I would meet anywhere between 30 to 100 people a month because I work in a English as a second language school where we have refugees and immigrants come in. So we often would have this sort of turnover. And then I taught older adults, which I still do that online. And I would have usually some of the same people, but a lot of new people each session. So that would sort of recycle every 2 months to 3 months. So I would have a lot of people with the same names, which would quite frankly make it harder because there were so many Jones and Marys and Dianes that it's like, oh, which one is your name this? And then I'd always remember the males because I always had way more females. And if I had 2 or 3 men, their names were outliers. They were typically male gender identified names. And so it would be easier to remember them, where it was a little bit more difficult to remember women. So another challenge with remembering names is if there are a lot of people at the same time and you have to remember a lot of people. And while I absolutely love it, but going to Atlantykron and then meeting so many students all at once, it would take a minute to remember everybody's name. And that would be a little bit challenging, just like when I would get a new class. But so that's just something you do. You can try. It works probably about 80% of the time. No memory strategy is necessarily going to be perfect for every situation. So you try different ones and see what works for you, and then you can switch it up. And so you can, so with the name one, you say their name immediately and you say it out loud. There's benefit of it going out your mouth and in your ear. So for those of us back in the olden days when we had to remember phone numbers, we would say them out loud to remember someone's phone number. That's almost a universal strategy to remembering a telephone number. Now we just plug it into our phone and we don't know anyone's phone number anymore. A lot of people don't even know their own phone number. You go, what's your number? They're like, oh, give me a second. I don't know. So we tend not to see that as a need, and then think when our phone dies, we kind of panic because we don't have anyone's number. Although you can always go into your account, look on your bill if you're near a computer. So anyway, that's a whole different strategy. But you say their name, you try to recall it 2 minutes later, and you get rid of the awkward. You just ask them. It's usually not awkward at that point. And then you try to recall it about 45 minutes to an hour later, or some amount of time later. It could be 3 hours later, but usually you have a better chance of remembering it an hour later. And then you forgive yourself. Not remembering somebody's name, a lot of people get really upset and they feel really bad, and oh my gosh, I forgot their name. And I think people forget my name all the time. I'm not offended by that. And we don't have to treat it like we've run over their dog. We don't need to act like it's the worst thing we've ever done. We forgot a name, and they probably forgot yours too. So you just made it easier for them. All right. And I guess the other thing I want to ask, which is good teaching, is for anybody, I don't know if everyone in here or anyone else had come to the class yesterday. So if anyone has any questions from yesterday. Okay. I'm guessing by the silence in the room. Is there anyone on Facebook that says, hey?
I'm watching both chats. So if a question pops up, we've got a handful of people watching live on Facebook, great. And then here. So I'll watch to see if there's anything. I'll try to interpret it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so now we'll go to a quick review of what I went over yesterday. And then I probably will show a little bit of the video because I feel like it does explain a little bit more. It expands. And then the design of the class, I had it so I would do it one day, the next day, and then have a little bit of time for Tuesday, so that if people wanted to practice memorizing something and seeing if it worked, they could then provide their experience and their reflection on Tuesday. And I can give them a little test. So I first gave a brief overview of memory. So we talked about episodic / declarative memory, and I'm sorry, episodic and semantic. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here. It's Sunday, and I think my brain is still not wanting to teach on Sunday for some reason. Anyway, so I talked about the two major types of memory. There's many types of memory. One is reflexive memory. So if you touch a hot stove, you recognize that it's hot, and your body will remember that, will store that information. It almost doesn't even have to go to the brain level. And so when you see something hot, or you predict that it may be hot, you kind of automatically have a physical response before having to think about it. So that's a type of memory as well. So, but we talked about declarative explicit and then non-declarative implicit. And essentially non-declarative implicit is skill memory. Some people will call it procedural memory. So it typically has a series of steps, and it can be solely in your mind, such as with math or reading and writing, or it can, and actually reading has a physical component to it if you really want to get specific to it, but moving your eyes across a page is a physical motion along with decoding information. Then declarative explicit memory, episodic, is the type of memory that we all think about when we talk about memory and remembering and improving our memory. And so when we look at this, a lot of people, if they can't remember yesterday, if they can't remember what they had for breakfast 3 weeks ago, they tend to panic a little bit, especially as we get older and we sit there and go, oh my gosh, you know, I must not be, something must be going on. And I want to say that I've noticed a lot of people like in their late 20s, early 30s, starting to have that conversation with themselves and with other people, like, oh, I can't remember, it must be because I'm getting older. Where when we're younger, we tend to have other reasons why. And the research shows that we don't remember less as we get older. There's no evidence to support that. And then I in teaching these classes, I had this epiphany and say, why do we attribute good memory to the young when that's when we've had the worst memory of our lives, when at our youngest points of our lives? So from like 0 to 8 years old, we really don't remember a lot. And that's because we lived in more present moment in the more subconscious part of our brain, where as we get older, we start using our higher cognitive abilities and are more conscious of things. And so the memory kind of kicks in and it actually improves. and then we're always sort of comparing, and we're not necessarily taking into account those environmental factors that are impacting our memories, such as being busier or life changes. We start to get into routines, and then when we switch up the routine, we will forget things, and we'll forget where we put our keys, and we'll forget what we had for breakfast yesterday. But we don't take into account those things. A lot of people go into the, oh, I must be getting older, and it just doesn't show that that's what happens. What does happen as we get older and sort of much further in our years is that we have our other systems breaking down. So our vision starts to become blurred, our hearing starts to decrease, then we might trip or fall or not feel so imbalanced. So then we start to preserve our body in so many ways. Like we just kind of say, okay, you know, the last time I tried to go out, I couldn't hear anybody, I can't really see anything, and I almost fell, so I'm going to limit going out. Well, when that happens, then we stop that stimulus coming into our body that keeps our brain sharp, and then that starts to deteriorate, and it becomes what I call this cycle of deterioration. And what we need to do is fight that urge to protect and preserve. You want to be smart about it, but you have to go to the doctor and you have to check in on your senses. So if you're losing your vision due to cataracts, which if you live long enough, you'll be able to get some cataracts, and then you'll know, wow, I've made it. And then you get those treated. And if you think about it, it makes sense. So yesterday we talked about the analogy of the computer, and if you have a mouse that's battery is, so I have an external mouse, and if my battery is starting to go, I don't know if on these things they just go, but let's say they slowly go, then, and I don't really notice it at first, which usually don't, it's a slow decline, then you're not going to realize until it gets better. And I don't know how many times I've had that experience where I've been sick or haven't been feeling well, and I didn't know how sick I was until I started to get better. So if you don't address that, then it's going to impact the input going into your brain, and then that affects the development of it. And it just kind of makes sense. But if you keep those things sharp, you exercise, you eat right, you feed your social soul, you feed your emotional soul, you feed your learning, then you're going to keep that stuff active. And as I mentioned yesterday, you're never too young and you're never too old to work on these skills. Never. Research shows. They do a lot of studies on people who are in advanced Alzheimer's type of units and programs, and they'll do this research on them, and they'll put these interventions just to activate and still stimulate their mind, whether it's playing music or having them sing or do these social kind of events, and they will improve in cognitive tests within a couple months. And these are people with advanced stages of Alzheimer's and disease. So if it can work for somebody who has a struggle, this is another thing that I just want people to really sink their teeth into, is that Heather and I both, I'm going to take the screen share off in just a second here, because if you walk away from anything with this besides memory or whatever, take this into your heart, your body, your mind. Remember this one fact, is that Heather and I used to work with people with brain injury, and we saw many people who overcame some of the hardest disabilities, right, Heather?
Yeah.
And some had to do with memory, and some had to do with their body. Some were told it was amazing they even survived. Some said they were told they couldn't walk, and now they were walking. And I mean, just story after story after story. So we kind of knew anecdotally, but it never resonated with me until about, I want to say maybe 6 months ago to a year ago. I was listening to a podcast about a guy who lost his eyeballs at 3 years old, and he learned how to see by being blind. And not only did he do that, but he teaches people how to see who don't have a visual system. They're either born blind or they became blind as a child. And he teaches them how to see, that their visual processing center in their brain is almost that of a sighted person. The only thing they can't see necessarily is color and maybe details, but they can navigate the world like a sighted person. And it hit me, and I thought, if somebody can do that, then what then can I do? What can I do to change my brain? If a blind person can then see, so to speak, that means that what can I do? And I'm not aware of anything without a diseased brain, or without, I have all the faculties of my brain. Am I maximizing that? And so often I'll hear people say, as I'm teaching them these strategies and these things, these interventions that they can utilize to improve their health, they'll say, well, I don't have anything wrong with me, so why would I do that? And I think, because you can do so much more. The difference between, let's say, me and somebody who has their eyeballs removed is that they don't have a choice. They're not distracted by 18 million other things that they want to do. And going back to that theme yesterday, that our brain likes to be efficient and wants it to be easy, my brain's going to go, you got some eyeballs, you don't need to do anything different. So I actually have to, somewhere in my something, it's got to be my other part of my brain, come in and say, no, you need to challenge yourself. You need to do these things. And when you say I can't, or this is hard, you need to do it more, as long as it's healthy and beneficial for you. So if for older adults, if they can't get up out of a chair, instead of saying I can't get up out of a chair, I need a chair that's going to raise and push me, I actually should be doing exercises every day of how to get up out of a chair. Not, oh, I can't do it. Then you try to learn how to do it more. Now, of course, there's limitations out there, and it goes with memory. Like, oh, I can't remember names, I'm never going to be able to do that. Well, of course you're not, if you're not even going to try to change that. And then you don't, and my other thing is, don't expect perfection. So this, you guys can look up non-declarative implicit memory, declarative. It'll give you maybe more involved, complicated description than what I gave you, because this is just a brief overview. I'm parsing it out. I did recommend for people to look up patient HM to understand that the hippocampus is not part of procedural memory. So you can still learn skills and learn how to do things without remembering ever having to do them. And the hippocampus it's actually the mechanism that they believe takes short-term memories and put them into long-term memory stores. The other thing I didn't mention yesterday too is the hippocampus helps process visual spatial information. So as you move around the world, it helps give you the sense of distance and where things are in space. And space and time, so I talked about that time feeling and episodic memory. Space and time are intertwined, or not space and time, space and time. So space, distance, and time are intertwined with each other. I'm not going to get too much into that. I do a different class on time perception, but space and time in your brain are pretty much interconnected, and it's very hard to parse those two out from a conceptual standpoint in your brain. So yesterday we talked about the code, and the code is English-based. I don't know if anyone discovered a translated version into another language. And I say English-based because we go based on the English letters. However, it is the sounds. And so most languages, not all, but most languages have these sounds. So I'm just going to go through as a review with the sounds of the code. So 0 would be coded to z. 1 would be coded to d, t. And I mentioned voice and unvoiced. So d is a voiced sound of t, because you go t and not feel the vibration in your throat, and then you can go d and you feel the vibration. Otherwise, it's all the same sound. N, and then for 2 is n, and then you can kind of remember that there's 1 hump and then there's 2 humps for three, but there's more. 4 is So if in your language you more go then it's and it's not How's that? Am I impressing anybody right yet? Okay. So 5 is I'm sure you guys were like, wow, I just sat there and listened to her make sounds for 5 minutes. 6 is so j, sh, sh, j, z, and g. Z, z. And this sound, the ZH sound, isn't really in English, but it probably is like in French, and it might be in Romanian too, but I can't think of a word that has that in there, but and then 7 is the hard k, so it comes from the back of the throat. K, k, g, ch, and then that's the hard ch versus the sh. And then the q, and then F and V are also voiced and unvoiced of the same mouth movement, so v. And then B and P, so again, it's where it's coming from in your face or your head. B, p, voiced and unvoiced. And then the unassigned are the vowels as well as W, H, and Y. So what you're going to do is when you get a string of numbers, you're going to encode them into a word using this code. And then when you want to recall it, you take the words and then you decode it. What I want to do is just show you a quick clip of the video, because the guy is going to demonstrate it. It's just much better having it demonstrated. Hi, Pac, I see you. I just saw your name. I don't know if you go by Pac anymore, but share computer sound, but I think she's in here. So, okay. So let me just get to the one part. And as I mentioned, I have the link.
It's no secret that our brains remember different types of
inefficient
study technique,
but this video is embedded in the course,
method out there for easily remembering any number that you want to keep up in your cranium. Most prominently explained pairings, which I'm going to explain
we'll move ahead
examples here in a second, but first I do need to explain that table of phonetic pairings. Within the major system, every digit from 0 to 9 is paired with a specific sound that we sound quite similar. Words once you do have your encoded consonants. All right, enough fooling around. Let's do an example so you can see the.
Okay, so I want to mention too that that I know, so for those of you that are just coming in today, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have to remember phone numbers like we do anymore, but maybe you want to remember a phone number. But there are other digits, long strings of numbers that we may need to memorize, but it's not so much about that. This is more like learning how to add and subtract in memory strategies. The fact that if you choose to work on this and you choose to embrace this and decide to do it, that it will improve your memory just by doing that exercise. It's almost like if you decide to become a ballet dancer, but you just start running to get your body conditioned. This is like running. This is like a conditioner for the bigger stuff in trying to remember things. And today I am going to show you the expansion of the idea of what to do once you sort of get past, or you can just skip to this other memory strategy, but this really digs it in for you.
The system in action. So a couple of days ago, I went to the coffee shop near me to do a little bit of reading, and I started reading this book called The Dip by Seth Godin. Now, this book is only about 75 pages, but I wasn't
ahead to this string of numbers.
dog-ear the pages in my books. That meant that I was going to have to memorize the page that and if we pull up our handy little
not going to do it for a page
we could
number.
go with ref, but I am just going to go with this part. It can be really helpful to also come up with a word that represents the context of the situation. In this case, the book that I'm reading. In the movie Spaceballs, then it recalls dull.
You guys can watch that part on your own. Okay, here we go.
10 digits. What happens when we have a lot more digits to memorize? This is the point where you want to combine the major system with other memorization systems. And the first step to doing that is to chunk the digits you're trying to memorize, which means to break them down into smaller groups. Technically, you could use chunks of any size, but remember, you are translating these digits into consonants. So the bigger your chunks are, the harder it's going to be to find a word that represents them all, because they all have to remain in order. Because of that, I think it's good to work with chunks of 2 digits. If we go that route with our 10-digit phone number, we get 51719928 and 49. Then, just like before, we translate those digits into consonants and create words out of them. In this case, I went with these. And now comes the part where you combine the major system with another memory system, because now you need to remember this list of words in its exact order. Now, there are a ton of different techniques out there that you could use to do this, one of them being the method of Loki, also known as the memory palace, which has you associating the information you want to remember with specific locations inside a place like your house. But the method of Loki is pretty complicated, and I should probably do an entire video on it, so I'm going to do that pretty soon, and in this case, I'm going to make up a story using my words instead. One of the really powerful things about creating a story is that our brains naturally latch onto stories, and because stories are linear, we understand the order in which events happen, so the words are easy to pull out in order as well. And just like with my crazy Spaceballs story from before, the more outlandish and odd your story is, the easier time your brain is going to have remembering it. So there you have it. Translate your digits into consonants, create words out of those consonants, and then create crazy stories that help you remember those words, and then work backwards from there to get.
So what I'm going to say here, let me mute you. Okay, is with you decode or you encode the numbers. You take the number, you create a word. So that's what we talked about yesterday. Do we remember what the word was from yesterday, or what and I'll ask, we didn't have people in the group, so I couldn't see who attended. So if somebody attended yesterday, do they remember what the word was, the 2 words? I don't know.
I have no memory of that.
You don't.
I'll be honest. I don't remember.
See, it works. No. It takes time. So the word was shaggle, right?
That's right. Fraggle dab. Got it.
Shaggle was the word. So when we go back to it, and so there was a number that we had. We took a number, and it was, so what we do is we decode that. And so you might look at this process that he just showed us and go, I would just remember the number. But when you have super long strings of numbers, it's hard. And then the issue is people look at it and they go, well, this is so cumbersome. Why would I do that? It would take me a long time to kind of remember this chart or this graph or this code. But here's the thing, it's like learning a new language, it's like learning to read, or actually it's more like reading a new language, or just learning to read in general. You already know how to do this. And so my personal anecdote, I taught a group of people who are 55 and older. I taught about 15 to 20 of them, and at least 3 or 4 people embraced this. We had a week of time between each class. And in 1 week, people who spent about 20 to 30 minutes a day on this, maybe a little bit longer, they were able to do this within a week. And so some people kind of were like, why would I do this? It's not very efficient. But I'm telling you that memory experts or memory competitors who are champions do this strategy, and it's like a exercise for your brain. So if we take and we backwards, if we decode this, that's basically what backwards encoding is decoding. And we take, it was dab, shaggle. So we would then go, it's 1, and again, the vowels are not assigned. So 1 and 9. And then shaggle is 6. And then G is 5, or not G, is 7. And then 5 is L, is the L sound. So we have 19675, and that is the number from yesterday. So it worked. Now, it's not very efficient, but what winds up happening is the more that you do this, the faster you'll get at it. Just like if you were to practice any other skill. A skill is something you learn, you practice, you test, and then you learn it some more, you study it. And so this isn't any different. And if you didn't see my class yesterday, or if you weren't a part of it, I had said how when I first saw this, I was like, this is the dumbest memory strategy I've ever seen. And then I watched Minds Explained, and it was the memory episode. And this master memory champion talked specifically about the major method mnemonic. So her name is Yanje Wintersoul. This mnemonic that you use, and she uses it, and this is one of the strategies she had. She said this is her main strategy she uses. She doesn't say that's why she thinks she has an excellent memory, so we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But he had mentioned the method of loci. So the method of loci is, and that's not the method he used, but that's the second strategy I kind of teach in this memory strategy. He said he used a story, which is fine. Whatever other mnemonic that works for you. But when we talked about dab shaggle, I actually imagined in my mind what I looked like to you guys when I went like this, because I couldn't see what I looked like. So I went like this, and then I'm like, oh yeah, we struggled with the word shaggle, which isn't even really a word, but we pretended it was like something from our childhood. And by we, I mean Heather and I, because there was this show called Fraggle Rock. And so at first I was like, oh, isn't that a Muppet thing? And no, it was Fraggle, not Shaggle. But so all of that story from yesterday came back to me. I hadn't thought about it again until today. So it worked. And I didn't even consider today when I was doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, I would have to talk about that tomorrow. So method of loci. So I did not study that. I didn't, after class, go, okay, I didn't even write it down, which I say is the best memory strategy or best method. So method of loci has been around for thousands of years. It was before the ever life-changing, for the worse or better, depending on who you talk to, of pen and paper. When pen and paper and the printing press came along to print books, people were worried that this new technology was going to change people's brains and make their memories worse. So it sounds very familiar to cell phones and computers and being able to store things, because that's a big question. Are our minds getting worse now that we have all this information and we're able to store it, so we're not memorizing information? We're just like, oh, I can go look that up when I have data or internet. And then when I don't have data or internet, I just blink blankly, like not remembering, because I thought I would always have access to Google. So But honestly, they really thought books were going to ruin humanity because it would change the way our brains think. So before all of that, there was a method called the method of loci. So if you want to remember information in general, this is a great method, especially if you're in school. And you take a place you're familiar with usually. So your house is a great use. And you picture in your house, so if you have to remember kind of this abstract information, you can picture in your house like your living room, and you would place certain facts or information around your living room and know that that's where autoimmune diseases live. Let's say you're studying to be a doctor. So autoimmune diseases live in your living room. Cardiac diseases live in your dining room, and so on. And you kind of picture those things around your room. So the fact that you have this mental imagery and this positioning is a memory strategy. Now, back in the olden days, whether it was memory palace or method of loci, is people who were telling stories like those great long Greek tragedies and all of that. They would be 6 hours long, and people, the way that they passed those stories on was through what they call orations, or these big long presentations. So what people did was they imagined walking down a path that they normally walk down through woods that they would use the method of loci, and they would sort of tell the story and then sort of imagine, all right, the next part of this story is the next part of this path, and if they had to remember the information. So this is it should be all in our epigenetic DNA here to be able to access this. But a lot of times people don't realize that this is a strategy that's on hand for them. And I've personally used it for things that I've had a more challenging time remembering when there's a lot of information to remember. I tend to have the ability to study, though, from a page, from handwriting out for a study guide for notes, and I visually can picture on the paper the information that I'm trying to absorb. And for the things that are more challenging, I'll actually picture the paper, where eventually I just wind up learning the information. So an exercise I gave the group before was to remember to pick a string of numbers or all these numbers. So this is what I want us to do for Tuesday. Now, of course, people can totally cheat, but if you wanted to test your memory, you can screenshot or clip or do whatever you can, or just take your phone and take a picture of the screen, these digits, and I'll give you a minute, and then try the strategy of the major method. Now, like 4 days is not enough time, I don't think, to learn this memory strategy, but you just practicing it will help in some way. And then on Tuesday, what I'll do is if you come back to the class, I will just ask you. We will actually go around the room. I mean, if there's 100 students here, I don't know how effective that will be, but I'll pick like 5 or 6 students who think that they can take at least one string of numbers, or maybe they want to do all strings of numbers.
I'm going to try one string.
Okay, so take a picture of it, and then what you would do, yeah, if you try to write it down, I'm not going to be on the page long enough unless you're a super fast writer. So what they suggested was to either chunk it in 2s or 3s. So it's called chunking. So chunking, for example, I wouldn't say 2, 4, 8, 3. I would go 24, 83. That would be chunking it, or taking the numbers together, or going 248. I wouldn't know what that number is, but one day I want to have this be in the positive in my bank account. Like, that's one thing. I should have that number. That would be awesome. Let's all do that right now. Let's mentally imagine that these are the numbers in our 10 bank accounts that we all have one day, if you believe that. So that's one practice. And again, if you want this link, message me on Facebook. My I believe my profile is public, so you should be able to find me pretty easily. There are 2 of me out there, but the other one is kind of a much older picture. So the picture that you'll see, I actually have blonde hair. The older picture, I have red hair. So the other thing with method of loci, so this is kind of like that, but you could take a picture of this, you could try to remember this. Now, often I go to examples of the body and the brain to talk about methods of loci, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. I can just picture a body and go, that's the arm, or that's the tibia, or that's the fibia, or whatever. That I can picture a body and use the method of loci to know where things are located. And so in the brain, you can kind of do that too. So you can sort of place it and then chunk the information here. So you have the parietal lobe, and then what functions it is mostly responsible for. And I just want to give my own little Francism here, my own little thing to tell you that a lot of people like to hang on to something concrete and clear. And everything's fluid. Everything's analogous. Nothing is digital in the brain. It's not that the parietal lobe controls these things only, and only the parietal lobe does it. Your whole brain is involved in the processing of knowing right from left. And your body's involved in that, by the way. You know, right, left, you're probably saying, which side is that? If I had my video mirror image to, like, it would even be more confusing because you can switch your view of your video. Reading, as I mentioned, it's a physical thing. Well, reading, vision is somewhere else. So all of these things are wrapped up together. It's just who's most responsible, who's the team lead in the brain for those areas. And what happens though is people want to say, oh, right side, left side, I'm right-sided thinker, I'm left side. That's a myth. There's no such thing as that, unless you only have the right side of your brain in your head, and then if you do, then it's controlling everything that both sides would do anyway. So there are no right or left-sided thinkers per se. You are both. And even right side dominant, left side dominant is kind of a myth. Although when we're taught that, so I still have that very ingrained in the way I think sometimes, but really it's all the same. And emotional, logical, they say your logical brain makes decisions. Nope, it's your emotional brain. And if you did not have an emotional center, which some people have a disconnection there, they'll have a lesion or disease, they can't make a decision. You have to be emotional to be able to make a decision. You have to feel emotion. You don't want to be out of control, but you have to do that. Okay, this is another thing you can take a picture of. Let me see if I can make it a little bit smaller. So this one is good also for positioning. It's one that's much better demonstrated in person than it is on Zoom. So if you picture, let me see if I can get my scribbles off the screen here. If you can picture these things throughout a room, you will remember the string of images. And your body is more wired to remember this versus words and numbers. So, and some people that I worked with, they made a story out of it. And I had, I think, at least 2 people be able to name, so there's 12, 16 objects here. So they missed maybe 1 or 2 objects after memorizing it for a week. And they didn't even really, they're like, oh, I kind of did it. And then we had a little test and they got like almost all of them. So again, this is a great strategy to use. And a minor challenge is just take like 1 row and try to remember what the objects are. And then a bigger challenge would be to remember a block of it. And then the master challenge would be to do all of them. You'll get the award of my love and admiration, which it doesn't take a lot. So
I'm going to try. I took a picture of those. So I'm going to try.
Yeah. So I mentioned too that forgetting is a feature of remembering. And it's not, so some people will describe that, that memory is like a room, like you have to store things in it. And so the more stuff you pack in it, the more you have to file through and try to find information. So I do believe there's a little truth to that. Like if you have all of this information, you have to kind of filter through it to get to what you're trying to think of, then it helps, but there's no limit to it. It's not like a limited room. Your memory is unlimited. Unlimited, and it doesn't matter your age. And I wish I had a video of this woman that was in my class, 97 years old. I think she turned 98, and you would never know it. And she probably, you would guess she was like in her 60s by the way she behaved. And then for some of you, you might be like, 60s, still old. And so the 60-year-olds feel that way. But the reality is that it's just such a cliche, but you're only old as how you feel. And this woman, everything I would teach people for brain fitness, she would say, France, I go outside, I go for walks, and it's outside, and I look at nature, and I do this, and I learned a new language at 45, and I did all of these different things. She goes, don't you think everyone should be doing this? And I said, why, yes, I do. I think everyone should be doing these exercises to help your brain stay young, or to at least improve the longevity. I don't like to use the word young because that's not what you're doing. You're increasing your longevity. And the earlier you do these habits and things, the longer your longevity will be, the better it will be. Now, of course, there's always disease and other factors that come into play, and trauma that can impact it. But really, if you put these habits in place as soon as you can, and it takes time to do that. When I decided to go out and teach all of these things, I realized exercise is the number one thing you can do to help grow new neurons, is what the research has shown in the past 20 years, that you can grow new neurons, especially in the hippocampus, and exercise does that. And I was working so much, and I thought, and then I changed to be able to teach, and I realized I better walk the walk. Literally, I better start walking or exercising 30 minutes a day if I'm going to start telling people that. And so I have been. I exercise almost at least 30 minutes a day, 5 to 7 days a week. The other thing you can do, which I'm not so great at, it's one of the hardest, easiest things you can do, is meditation. And that's what the Memory Champion also said was one of the biggest things that has helped her be the Memory Champion, to help her memory. So I put in the course information on meditation. I know Heather is a master in meditation. It's just one of the people that I looked at. So we'll talk more about that on Tuesday. But if you have a chance to look up Yanja Wintersoul, she's written books. She's in that Netflix Mind Explained memory episode, and it's fascinating how great her memory is and what she attributes to it. And then meditation is now being recognized as this great beneficial intervention for your health. It's finally, science is finally caught up with what people had known for thousands of years. And so, as I've mentioned before, that the anecdotes, sort of the non-science things that I used to kind of like in America, we'll be like thumb our nose at, like we'll just be like, oh, that's ridiculous, that's not empirically researched. That just because it hasn't shown up in the data doesn't mean it's not effective. Now, what I caution people is that you don't do things instead of the things that are scientifically proven. You add them to your repertoire. So, and if it's not going to hurt you or cost you anything, except for maybe your time and a little bit of your frustration in learning how to do things, because I think meditation is one of those things that frustrates people because they don't recognize that it's just about letting things be as they are. And that's very challenging for people. But while it helps your memory, I also think there's an aspect of meditation, and if anybody knows the toy Etch-a-Sketch, where you shake the screen and it goes clear, it kind of clears your mind to allow for other things to go in. So if I'm worrying about what I'm getting at the grocery store later, like, oh, I have to get bread, and I'm worrying and causing that, but if I meditate, I may forget that I needed to get bread later. So what I do is the strategy of write down, I get bread later, because the health benefits of me clearing my mind is so much more important. So I'll leave time. I know we only have a couple minutes, but for any questions. And let me just say this. So what I want you to do is practice memorizing those strings or pictures or brain or all of it, like whatever you want to do. But go ahead, Heather.
Hey, so my question was a little further back, and if anybody has any questions, they're able to put in the chat or to save them for the next discussion, because I know our time's a little limited today. But my question is, aren't we wired to, you talked about it before, like in memorizing numbers, we kind of group them. Like in the US, our phone numbers are designed in sort of a grouping, or our social security numbers. But then European numbers, I think they're laid out just a little bit different. And that always made me curious that there wasn't maybe a universal system, or maybe one system's better than another system. I don't know. But I was curious just about grouping, or do you know, like, hey, we're more wired to remember 7 numbers or 10 or 3 at a time versus 6 at a time?
So we definitely do better with chunking of information, but I don't know if that's a wiring thing per se. It's more of an attention. It's partially attention and how they presume the short-term memory works. So they realized that, and this was when I went to school. I graduated with my undergrad in 2004. So those 3 years, and it matters timing-wise because of what research is out there and what's happening in the world. But it used to be that the average brain could hang on to 7 bytes of information in a short period of time. And so a phone number is 7 bytes. And then if you chunk it, then it's 3 bytes, and then it's much easier to remember. Now they say with the computers and all of that, it's more like 5 bytes, but it's an average. So remember that too. It's an average. It means maybe some people can do whatever the average 7, maybe 14, and then other people can only do 2. And it really depends on what's going on. And then I mentioned earlier the factors that can affect that. So pain, stress, people, I had a neighbor banging upstairs a couple minutes ago, and if it was loud enough for you to hear it, you would be distracted by those sounds. So it's impacted by all of those things. But in the best of conditions, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 bytes of information. I honestly, and I don't know the history of phone numbers and the development of the phone, but I don't think it had much to do with the way that people remembered things. I think it just is how it progressed and it evolved as a technology. I don't know. It would be kind of a fascinating yet super boring story for somebody, and fascinating for another person about the history of that. But I don't think that the makers of telephone numbers had necessarily considered the masses as far as how they would remember phone numbers.
Okay, got it. Okay, are you able to see the chat, France? I see a couple questions in there.
So how has this method, memory method, personally helped you? Thank you, Natalia. So I personally, initially, like, it's called poo-pooed. I was like, this is a ridiculous memory strategy. I thought it was ridiculous. So I haven't fully embraced it per se, but now I do totally believe in it because of what I saw in the Netflix show, and then I started to explore more and then started to understand more. So what it's personally let me know is that I'm capable of doing it, because it's just like learning how to read, which I've done. So encoding, decoding, it's helped me understand memory a little bit better. It let me know that I should be doing more with this, because it, just by doing it, whether I'm good at it or not, it doesn't matter. It's going to help enrich my memory. working on different memory strategies and different things, as I mentioned, like with the exercise and doing different exercises to up your game in whatever sport you're in, or any sort of physical thing, is going to improve the performance of that. So if I work on this, it will help improve the performance of my memory. I have used the method of loci memory strategy, and that has helped me to pass exams and pass tests with a lot of information. So, and again, you don't have to use just one memory strategy. You can mix them all together. You don't have to just try, but sometimes, like when you're learning a new skill, you want to learn those basic steps first. The other question was from Nicole. Thank you, Nicole. There's a couple Nicoles in here, so it's Nicole Basalashi. I'll try to decode your name by next class. What methods to use to remember more numbers at once? So this is the method, by the way. The major method system is probably the #1 method memory strategists use. Translate them into stories, or when remembering stories, can we change them into numbers? Like, for example, studying for math and biology. So to be honest, I can't tell you what the best method is. It's what the best method for you is, and you have to sort of figure that out. So if you're going to school, what you want to do is you learn the method. So try the method, the major system, PEG system. Try this out with what you're talking about. Study it like on Monday, study it again on Tuesday, then wait till Thursday to test it, and then till next Tuesday. Because when you space out your learning, you are creating the conditions as if you were when you're studying, and you create the conditions as when you're being tested. If you cram, which means study the night before, it's so ineffective. And then you may remember it the next day, but you're not going to learn the information for long term. So you want to space out, you want to kind of front load your studying, then space out your testing of what you've learned, and then improve. And that's true for any kind of practice too. For if you were learning how to play volleyball or ride a bike, you have to have sort of this rest period in between to improve your performance. Research has shown that time and time again with learning. And it's true for any skill, for a cognitive skill or a physical skill. I hope that answered your question. So do memory games? Yeah, anything you do to test your memory. So the question is, should I play memory games? Do they help improving the memory? Absolutely. So this is so silly, and I'm just going to own this, but on Facebook, I'm a Facebook memory game, or not memory game, but Facebook game addict, and I need a meeting. But I have played this game where it's called, I never remember the name of the game, but it's a visual thing where you pick out the pictures. It's a great way to learn English words, because unless it's in other languages, but you learn objects and stuff. And it improved my visual memory for scanning the scene and finding things, because you have to find it and then you go back in and you play it again. And I thought, oh, this would be a great study, like for someone to create this game and to see when somebody played it, and then when they play the same game again. And I would notice I would get so much faster even if it was like 6 days later and I hadn't played that particular board, I still would have been way faster than the first time I did it. So it was fascinating to me, and I noticed that it was improving in my real life. So how does that help me in reality? Is when I can't find something, I could just scan really quickly and go, oh, there it is. So it certainly helped my functioning of just being able to do that. And don't forget to remind me, but I have a great memory strategy for not losing things.
Oh, that sounds like a good one.
And I'll tell you guys on Tuesday.
If you can remember.
I know, I got to remember to tell you. So you have to remember to come back. I have to remember to show up. And then that's we can talk about that. Can I see it? Like, I don't mean to be...
people should turn on their cameras just to say hello, and we'll see you on Tuesday. If they can for a little bit. I have a few on.
If you registered.
We can invite people to turn on their cameras.
Hi, Natalia.
We like to see your
Oh,
background.
hello. Is that your sister?
No, this is my mom.
Oh, hi.
Hi, hello.
Nice to
Hello.
meet you. I
Nice
love your
to meet you.
daughter.
Such
She is-
an interesting class. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been
You're
wonderful.
welcome. Does anyone else want to show their face? I'm not going to
Yeah,
judge.
see, everyone's
Hello,
doing it now.
Anna.
Come up on your
Hi,
camera. say
Joan.
hi.
No judgment here. Nicoletta, have I met you before? Yeah, have I met you before? Alexandra, I haven't met you. No, I haven't met you, Nicoletta. Nicole, have I met you before, Nicole?
Look at all these beautiful people.
It's hard to know. Yes. Hi, Mostinois.
Everyone looks different in a different environment. So if it's like, it's not on the island, it's like, I'm not sure I've met you before.
Right. Like, yeah. Well, the funny thing is when I actually think I had dreams of faces for like a week after I left, but we do often meet so many people right away. And then from one year to the next, and you friend people on Facebook. And I remember one person, I'm like, have I met you before? He's like, I'm a friend of yours on Facebook and I met you last year. And I was like,
yeah.
but it's, and then some people are similar looking to other people too. So, yeah,
So
it's
what
great.
time on Tuesday, just to do a shout
8
out
o'clock,
for your
Tuesday
class?
morning, 8 o'clock.
Eastern.
Eastern time. Oh yes, I forgot. So that's
all they have to do is go to the website and click "What's my time?" and wherever you are in the world, it's going to convert it for you, and it'll tell you exactly when your class is and wherever you are. So.
And remember, if you want access to that course I showed you, so you can watch some of the videos that I put on there and just some information, private message me on Facebook and I'll send you the link to that. Okay. I'll definitely do that there. And I'm not like collecting information or doing anything like that per se. I'm just want to give you that link if you want it. I just don't want to make it super public to everybody.
Yeah, and I'll just mention too, for anybody on the page, if you did not register for the next class, but you want to attend, you have to go to the website to register, because that's how we send you your personal link. So that's important, because some people may have not realized, they might have not done all 3 days. Just make sure that you or send me an email, just to make sure that you're up and running here. So France, thank you again. As always, I had my morning cup of coffee with you. The sun is now risen here, so I'm very happy.
Good.
And I'm going to I took a photo, so I want to challenge everybody here too. If you took a photo of the pictures and the numbers, I'm actually going to work on this to see what I'm able to do by your next class. So my goal is to impress, but I don't know if that's possible. We're going to try.
Well, I want to make the point that if you don't do well, that's okay. That's like saying you're gonna, try to learn. Try to learn how to play Major League Baseball. This is the major system, right? But it's named major. But you'd want to come back and be ready for the big leagues by Tuesday. So
that's right. I'm just going to test the system, because you're right. I don't even have a phone number memorized, barely my own, only because I've had it for so long. And so when you get in a pinch, it's like, who do you call? And I used to remember at least 7 or if not more of my friends' phone numbers. We had them memorized. So, I think it's good to be able to do that,
I don't know my fiance's phone number.
Yeah. So
I know what it begins with, but it's like 413.
We'll start with our own phone number. Okay, France and everybody here. I love seeing everyone's faces. I'm going to see you hopefully in the conferences all day today.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mihai.
Thank you,
welcome.
Alexandra.
Have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you, too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll just say bye to everybody in the Granat, Andre. I don't know if I'm saying first last names. Bye, Tryon, Callan, Nicole. So thank you guys.
Bye.